All right, let's jump right in. Imagine a country building its future at lightning speed. We're talking new cities, massive solar farms, high-speed trains, the whole nine yards. But what's the one thing that has to connect it all? Today, we're going to look at a company that is, quite literally, wiring an entire nation for what comes next.
If you think about an economy's infrastructure, things like roads and ports, they're like the skeleton, right? But the wires and cables, oh, they are the veins and the arteries. They carry the lifeblood, electricity, to every single home, every factory, every data center. Without them, well, nothing moves, nothing lights up, nothing happens. And the scale of what's happening in India it's just mind-boggling. Through something called the National Infrastructure Pipeline, the country is pouring over $1 trillion into a total overhaul of everything. We're talking about goals like 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity, 100 new smart cities. It's a complete modernization of its power grid.
So that begs a pretty important question, doesn't it? With this incredible once-in-a-generation build-out happening, who's actually on the ground laying down all these essential electrical arteries? Well, that leads us straight to the focus of today's explainer, a company called KEI Industries.
To really get the KCI story, you gotta look at the numbers. And trust me, they don't just tell a story of growth. They show a really, really smart and strategic shift in how this company does business.
First things first, just look at this revenue jump. We're seeing a leap from about 2,300 crore to over 2,700 crore in just 1 year. That's a pop of almost 20%. This is not some slow and steady climb. It's a massive signal that the demand for what they make is just exploding. Okay, selling more stuff is great, but this is where it gets really interesting. Their profits didn't just grow, they shot up by over 31%. Now, why does that matter? Because it's way faster than their sales growth. That tells you they're not just getting bigger, they're getting smarter and way more efficient. And that is the recipe for some seriously powerful long-term growth.
And this chart right here, this basically shows you the secret sauce. See that big shift? They're leaning more and more on their dealer and retail network, which now makes up the majority of their sales. And this is a huge deal because retail sales, they often carry better profit margins, and they create a much more stable, predictable business than just relying on a few giant contracts. It's a brilliant move.
So we've seen the crazy growth, but what exactly does KEI do? Let's peel back the layers and break down the core of their business to see how all these pieces actually fit together. So putting it simply, KEI makes the electrical highways and byways for pretty much everything. We're talking about the huge high-voltage cables that carry power from a dam to a city, all the way down to the simple wires running behind the walls of your own home. They really do cover the entire spectrum. And here's the breakdown. As you can see, they are definitely not a one-trick pony. Almost half their business is that heavy-duty stuff for the national grid, but look at the rest. They're also a huge player in industrial automation, the housing boom, and even super specialized sectors like railways and solar power. They basically have a finger in almost every pie of this national growth story. When a company is growing this fast, it can run smack into a huge problem. You just can't make your product fast enough. KEI absolutely sees this coming, and they are making some seriously big moves to get way ahead of the curve. 1,000 crore, that's over 100 million US dollars. That is a massive number, and it screams confidence in what the future holds. They aren't just thinking about the next quarter, they're literally building the foundation for the next decade of growth. And here's their game plan for that cash. It's a really smart, phased approach. First, you max out the factories you already have. That's the brownfield bit. Then, you build up brand new, state-of-the-art factory from scratch. That's the greenfield project. And the whole thing is designed to do one thing: create a machine that can keep up this incredible 17+% growth rate year after year without ever hitting a wall. All right, now we get to what I think is the most fascinating part of KEI's recent story. It's this strategic puzzle that came up on their earnings call. At first, it sounds like a total contradiction, but when you dig in, it reveals a really clever long-term vision. So this is the company's philosophy, straight from the top. The chairman says, "We want to run a debt-free company." Okay, sounds pretty conservative, very stable. But here's the twist. They also just announced plans to raise up to 2,000 crore from the market. So how do you square that circle? Naturally, the analysts ask the obvious question. Hey, you guys are making tons of cash, so why are you raising all this money? And the answer was just brilliant, totally forward-thinking. They're basically saying, look, we're going to raise money from investors now, while we're strong, to pay for this monster expansion. That way, we won't have to go to the bank and take on debt later. It's a super clever way to fund explosive growth while staying true to their debt-free goal for the long haul.
So, when you just zoom out and look at the big picture, the story of this one company really becomes a mirror for something so much bigger. Their huge investments, their smart strategic shifts, their long-term planning, all of it just reflects the incredible scale and ambition of India's own national transformation. And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. In this era of incredible national development, we tend to focus on the flashy, headline-grabbing projects. But maybe, just maybe, the real story and the real opportunity lies with the companies providing the essential invisible connections that make it all work. Are they the ones we should really be watching?